Welcome back, guys. Here on Birds 365. We got EJ Smith from the Inquirer jumping on board with us. All right, I got a Phillies hat on today. Yours is clipped. I can't see it. What hat you got on there today?
I got the Philadelphia Inquirer today. Repping the company. I'm a company
Very
man.
nice. Good. Rep that company. Good for you.
Boy, EJ. Yeah.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on, EJ. We've been talking about the run game a lot, obviously, and the Eagles' inability to stop it against Washington. Where are you on this debate, EJ? The fact that, look, I think it was a complimentary issue. I think the offense played into it. I certainly think the Eagles don't stop the run nearly as well without Jordan Davis. But they have this philosophy, and their philosophy is limit explosive plays on the defensive side of the football. And if you do that and win the turnover ratio, you're going to win games. They've proven that through 8 weeks that is the formula to win games. They didn't put that formula together. There were two parts of it, the offense as well. Where do you kind of come down on this debate?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the way the Eagles defense is built. You know, we talk about how much better the Eagles run defense was with Jordan Davis, but even when Jordan Davis was, a big part of what they did up front, they still were, in the bottom third of the league in run defense with him in the equation. Obviously when he was on the field, they were doing, a little bit better against the run, but I think that this is how this defense is structured. I think it's a little bit of a choice, to not be necessarily stout against the run because of the things that it opens up on the back end. People talk about, oh, well, maybe they should run more 4-3, put 3 linebackers on the field and, try and stop the run by loading up the box. And it's like, if they put 3 linebackers on the field, it fundamentally changes the way that their secondary plays. And their secondary is playing at a really high level. So I do think that, this is kind of teams have kind of uncovered a way, especially for mediocre teams, some of the worst teams in the league, ways to kind of keep themselves in games or, maybe take advantage of the Eagles' weakness against the run. And, that might be something that costs them a game or two down the stretch of the season. So it's a big deal for sure. But, against the better teams, I do think that the equation that they have with, putting guys on the back end, having extra guys in the secondary, I think it is kind of over time, when you look at it from the macro, it kind of works itself out over time,
So you're saying that after this week's loss, 8 straight wins, 1 loss, got to balance those 2 numbers. But their response is, screw it, we are what we are, and we're not going to change a thing.
Well, no, I mean, I think that there are things that Jonathan Gannon can do on early downs to sort of, combat the problem that they have. Because really, if you think about it, they don't have another. Obviously, there's not many human beings on the planet like Jordan Davis, but there are people who play his position. And the Eagles don't really have another true 2-gapping nose tackle. And it's kind of funny to think about it when they come out of the offseason. When they drafted Jordan Davis, a few months before the draft, I was talking to some draft guys. I'm like, would they really draft, a nose tackle? Like, the Eagles have been 4-3 for so long. They've been 5 down under Gannon, but they sort of flipped between them the first year. And, they really don't have another player that does what Jordan Davis does. So it's not as simple as, well, let's just put Marlon Toipulotu at the nose, or let's put, Marvin Wilson or Javon Hargrave at that position. Jordan Davis is kind of that, that gap stealer, as people will call it. So there are things that they can do, whether it's run blitzes or, just like kind of having, different looks on early downs to kind of combat this. And I think that's what we'll see. I think this is why Jonathan Gannon gets paid, right? To figure out how to get things under control on early downs, because, I think he's proven by now he's a good coordinator, and it's easier to be a good coordinator when you're in 3rd and long, but he's a good coordinator at, calling up 3rd and long, 2nd and long plays. It's really those 1st and 2nd down when it's like 2nd and manageable, 1st and 10, and they get 6 yards on the ground. That's the stuff that I think he really has to shore up in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I think a lot of ways you bring up a good point. I think this is a roster problem, EJ, and the fact that, look, you can't have a great backup at every position, but you can have a similar player. And I thought way early in the process, when, we do so many of these projected 53s in the offseason, I thought Noah Ellis would be the backup nose tackle. And he got hurt just because he's a big 340-pound guy who can replicate, not as successfully, but can at least replicate what Jordan Davis does from a football standpoint. I think the fact that they don't have that player is a mistake. I think it was a roster construct because you got a bunch of three techniques, right? Fletcher,
Yeah.
Javon, Milton, bunch of three techs who aren't comfortable doing it. Marvin Wilson got a little bit of a chance in Houston. That didn't go well. So they don't have that type of player. And I say that for this reason. I want to shift to the offense because they don't have it. Now, it's tough to replace Dallas Goedert. I mean,
Yeah.
he's a top 5 tight end. But they don't they can have somebody who can line up, but they don't have somebody that can replicate what Dallas Goedert does, not to the efficacy. That's not what I'm talking about because he's a superstar player. But some of the similar things, they got the developmental type. We'll see if Tyree Jackson gets activated today. Grant Calcaterra can catch the football. Jack Stoll's a decent blocker. How impactful is that going to be to this offense losing Dallas Goedert?
Yeah, I mean, if you had asked me 2 weeks ago who is the most important player on the Eagles offense, I mean, maybe I would have went with like Lane Johnson or Jason Kelsey, but honestly, Dallas Goedert would have probably been my answer. I think that what he does, not just his production, but as you're talking about, the fact that he is one of the best blocking tight ends in the league. He's a excellent receiver. He's one of the most productive receiving tight ends in the league. And if you just watch the Eagles week in and week out, you see that when they need plays, it's AJ Brown and Dallas Goedert. And especially those like Dallas Goedert, some of that production is like, it's almost like a cheap way to get production with him. It's like, let's just throw him a screen out on the outside or even on the inside. Let's throw him a screen. He was leading all tight ends in rack. I think he was, top 5 in the league like overall. A lot of those RPOs with him releasing out to the flat. Those are plays that his athleticism makes happen. And you're right. Like Grant Calcaterra is a pretty good athlete, a good receiving threat. He's not as dynamic in the blocking game. And this is the biggest part with Dallas Goedert is his ability to do both is what makes the Eagles offense kind of go. When they're in 13 personnel, they don't have to run. A lot of teams, if you put 3 tight ends on the field, it's like, well, we can't pass out of this. When you've got, Dallas Goedert on the field, you can pass out of it. He's a legitimate receiving threat. And then on the flip side, when you're in 11 personnel, a lot of teams don't like to run out of 11, especially out of shotgun. But Dallas Goedert is a capable enough blocker that you can run out of 11 with him. Now, the Eagles' offensive line is a big part of that. They're obviously, a big part of why you can run out of shotgun. But Dallas Goedert is kind of that tendency breaker. He's somebody who kind of keeps you from being predictable. You can run out different personnel packages. And, we've seen the Eagles get really cute with that sometimes, like running 13 personnel for shot plays or, running 11 to just, bleed the clock out. And that's the type of stuff that Dallas allows them to do. And they're going to become a lot more predictable now because if Grant Calcaterra is on the field in 12 personnel, it's like, well, they might be taking a shot here. If Grant Calcaterra is on the field in 11, they're definitely not running the ball. All these things are going to start, creeping up. And this is a problem that most NFL offenses have. But, it's kind of one of those luxuries that the Eagles have enjoyed. And it's a big part of why their offense has been as effective as it has been.
Taking the importance of the position out of the debate, which is a bigger drop-off? Dallas Goedert to whoever's going to replace him, or Jalen Hurts with whoever's going to replace him, if he were.
Yeah, well, I guess I should have said excluding the quarterback. You're right, because Jalen Hurts is easily he's the thing that makes he's the straw that stirs the drink, I guess people would say. So yeah, you're right about that. I guess I should have qualified my statement.
I just wondered because
Gardner's a good backup though. Gardner,
but the offense would change so much.
It's got to change dramatically. But the offense.
Are we sure about that? Because John's been trying to sell me on the Eagles have this plan in place. And shall they never wander from it too far? Because it got would they employ that with the offense too if Gardner Minshew had to go in?
I think Jody is misdescribing. So I'll throw it at EJ. All right. So we'll go back to the defensive side. My thought is, and I said Jody, I told Jody, you can stop anybody in the running game. Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry, if you want. If you want to put 9 guys in, you can put 10 people in the box. You can stop anybody you want in the running game if you really, really want to. But it affects the back end, as you were alluded to a little bit. And the Eagles play that. The Eagles play the way they do. They play a lot of quarters coverage, cover 2, cover 6, whatever they're going to do, a lot of zone coverage on the back end. Obviously, if you're loading the box, you can't play zone coverage a lot on the back end. It's got to be press. It's got to be man to man. I also think the quarterback changes things. If they wanted to change, if they wanted to load the box against Washington, that's the week to do it, right? Against Taylor Heineke. Against Matt Ryan, he's not what he once was. But if he sees an 8-man box, EJ, he's still capable of recognizing it and making you pay for it. Am I crazy when I say that?
No, I mean, I agree with you. I think I think I said it earlier. It's a choice that they're not necessarily dominant against the run. And it's, if I can take you down an analogy, my wife drives this Jeep and it's got these big tires on it. And, we have to replace the tires, right? And we're going, oh, those tires weren't great in the rain. Those tires weren't great in the snow. And, maybe we want something that's better in the rain and the snow. But then you start going, oh, well, those tires are really quiet on the highway. And those tires, we got good fuel economy. It's like you don't realize, like, okay, you might be able to improve it somewhere, but you're going to pay somewhere else. And that's kind of what you're talking about with the defense. It's like if you want to load up the box, all right, well, you can't really play quarters anymore. And the Eagles defense is kind of built on the back end on quarters. It's harder to do those things. Again, like I said, if you put an extra linebacker on the field, you're not playing in zone coverage as effectively as you are with Josiah Scott or Avonte Maddox. You can't really play those like sub packages as much. Now, I agree with you. Against some of these lesser teams, it might be. I mean, against like the Texans or Washington, the Commanders, you probably can get away with let's load up the box. Let's put 3 linebackers on the field, and let's just trust. Although, I mean, I was going to say this, but it's like, do you really want Darius Slay and James Bradbury, as good as they are, covering Washington's receiving core all game? I mean, that's a good receiving core. So, I mean, against the Colts, I do think that you could see more of it. I don't think their receiving core is quite as good. I think you could trust Darius Slay and James Bradbury to kind of man up on those guys. But yeah, no, I'm with you. I do think that it's kind of that trade-off. It's like if you're going to be paying you're stealing from Peter to pay Paul. Is that the expression? It's a little bit of, kind of, again, Jonathan Gannon's a defensive backs coach at heart. I think he builds his defense from the secondary down. So
if I'm apologizing if I somehow misquoted John, but I'll instead try and say exactly what John said. He said that there is no chance Nakobe Dean is going to become part of their regular package. None.
No chance. None.
No chance. All right. So I know it's a bit of a hypothetical. Jonathan Taylor goes for $125 this week. Maybe the Eagles win, maybe the Eagles lose, but he goes for $125. The week after, Aaron Jones goes for $125, which he surely could do. We just saw him do it against the Cowboys. Now, I wouldn't play Nakobe Dean against Aaron Rodgers. But the week after that, they're playing Ryan Tannehill and Derrick Henry. Are you telling me you're not putting Nakobe Dean on the field? Because our philosophy is we play the zone defense we play. We never play 3 linebackers. We're not going to start now. You're playing against a team that doesn't have a great quarterback, doesn't have a great receiving core, but has maybe the most dominant running back in the National Football League. But damn it, we're not putting 3 linebackers out there because we haven't done it all year, and we're not going to fucking start now.
Yeah, I'm kind of with John on this. I mean, so here's the caveat I'll give you.
All 3 of you, Gannon included, are crazy.
So the caveat I'll give you is if the Eagles defense starts giving up 30+ points, and obviously the team gave up 32 against Washington, but it was kind of that garbage time touchdown, and the offense had 3 turnovers. But if the defense starts legitimately giving up big points with a run first team that's running a lot, at that point I think that the coaching staff will hit the panic button and go, let's figure out how we're going to fix this. But if I'm Jonathan Gannon, I mean, we gave up 26 points, not counting the touchdown from the defense. And really it was one of the field goals was basically they were in our territory when they got the ball. I mean, you can live with 18 play, 8-minute drives. Now, obviously, on the flip side, the offense isn't on the field as much, and they have to get off the field on third down. The defense, that was the biggest thing. And obviously, a big part of that's, they're in third and manageable. But still, even the 3rd and 5, 3rd and 6, anything 3rd and long, those are the ones you really got to get off the field. But I just kind of think that if they're giving up 20-something points and the Eagles offense is getting on the field enough, I don't think that they're going to hit the panic button just based off of this Washington win or the Washington loss.
Yeah, and the second part, and you kind of alluded to it, is, and I talk about it all the time, the complementary nature. We're not even talking about this if the offense doesn't perform like the offense does, because if they don't turn it over and they win the football game, okay, maybe the defense didn't have a good day, but they won the football game and everybody's not overreacting. I kind of go back. It's like playing Navy. I say it all the time. Mike Gill, we had our buddy Mike Gill. He mentioned Navy as well. you might look like crap one week playing Navy because you can't justify preparing for that nonsense. When you practice the way you play all spring and all summer, and then you're a successful team, you're set. Now I'm talking about the college level, and that's really drastic. It's not like that at the pro level. But the larger point is you don't change your philosophy in season. You can't just say, oh, Navy's on the schedule. We have to change our philosophy. So that's kind of where I am. They've made their decision. For the most part, the Eagles have made their decision. They believe, look, we're going to play light boxes. It's a lot easier when Jordan Davis is there and we have that presence. We don't have it, but you can't change your whole philosophy. Can you change your whole philosophy in season?
Your whole philosophy, I mean, that would be tough, but I do think that there is like something to be said about like they could be employing different ways. Now, like I'm not a defensive coordinator. I don't know exactly all the ways that you're gonna, the options that Jonathan Gannon has to sort of combat the run out of the looks that he has. But I do know that teams do it. I do know that teams, run with light boxes and still figure out how to stop the run.
Oh
So I
yeah.
do think,
Well, they usually have good players.
right. Well, that is kind of the sticking point. This all comes down to talent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I do think there are some things that he could try to stop the run, but I don't know. I'm not there yet. I try to watch the season as a
No,
the
I
entire
would
sample
say
size.
I would
Yeah.
say maybe a run blitz here and there. All
Right.
right.
Sure.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll buy that. But as
Yeah.
far as changing the whole philosophy, I don't know how you can do that. I think that's
Yeah.
panic.
I
And
mean,
there's no way you do it at 8-1.
Right.
There's no way.
I feel the need to jump in here because I'm not suggesting they go to every down a 4-3 defense. I'm talking about occasionally. I'm talking about against a specific down in defense. It's just like Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis doesn't play every down. He played 35% of the downs. Well, then how are you sticking to your philosophy? Oh, your philosophy has different looks and different angles and different players on the field in different situations. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that they should put Nakobe Dean out there as a starter and have him play 100% of the plays. I'm just saying maybe if he played more than 0% of the plays, he could help them slow down the run.
Well, and I'll bring EJ. They already toggle between 5 and 4-man fronts. They play 4-man fronts more than they play 5-man fronts typically. The difference is they don't play 3 traditional linebackers because of that quarters coverage, because of that, and that's their default, but there's also cover 6 and cover 2 and all the other zone coverage. That's the part that's not changing. That's the part I'm talking about. Not the fronts change all the time. They toggle between 5 and 4-man fronts.
So they have the capability of changing is the only point I'm trying to make.
Well,
they've already shown the ability. There's a hard line that they can't cross because of their defensive coverages in the backfield. Is that what you're saying? EJ
can talk. You can talk about that. They don't want to change. That's my thought. What's your thought, EJ?
Yeah, I mean, the third linebacker is like the sticking point because it's like if you have Nakobe Dean trying to carry a slot receiver 40 yards down the field, it's like that's not going to work. Now, I think that's where this becomes. Yeah,
I got to defend myself. They're not putting him out there in 3 wide receiver sets. We get that. Yeah. I'm talking about when they've got 2 tight ends and 2 receivers, you can put an extra linebacker on the field.
I think that's where I think that's what you eventually want to see from Nakobe Dean. I think that's what the Eagles are hoping eventually. Nakobe Dean is a guy who can carry tight ends down the field. I don't know if they're ready for him to do that yet. I mean, if they were ready, I think he'd be doing it. So I think, and that the sticking point here is like, well, if you don't trust Nakobe Dean to carry tight ends 40 yards down the field, then you have to be in a 4-2-5 when you have a 4-down front. You have to put, Avonte Maddox, Josiah Scott, whoever it is. Maybe you drop Chauncey Gardner-Johnson in the box and put Kayvon Wallace over the top.
You're going to put base defense 4-2-5.
Right, exactly. So that's what you're going to have to do. And that isn't great against the run. I mean, the Eagles have been worse against the run in the 4-down stuff. A lot of because of Jordan Davis's presence. But even Marlon Tuipulotu has been up and down. I think sometimes he makes some nice plays, but then other times he's out of position. So, and that's where it kind of becomes, well, there is like that barrier was if we're going to put a third linebacker on the field, we can't run the coverages that we run. And that's where I think it is a choice. It is a choice that Jonathan Gannon has made. That's like the coverages we run are more important to me than giving up an extra 1 or 2 yards in the run game consistently. Now, and this is where the Gannon thing I think really boils down to why we're always talking about Gannon is because his defense is not necessarily a fun one for Eagles fans to watch because they know what Jimmy Johnson did, Buddy Ryan, even Jim Schwartz to a degree. Those are all aggressive defenses downhill. Stop the run on the way to the quarterback, and we're going to get sacks, we're going to get pressure. This one's a lot more based in mathematics and analytics, and I think it's not always fun to watch a team get 3 or 4 yards every single time and grind out 16 play drives. But I do think that the decision they've made is they strongly believe that even though it might not be fun to watch, this is how we're going to win games. This is the best way to put us in a position to win. Now we can have the debate whether they're right, but I think that the debate to if they're going to change is if they're not, that's what they believe. So
Yeah.
I think it really comes down to, do you agree with their philosophy or not?
Yeah. And I do want to bring in the offense, because I think it's not in front of your face, so people don't see. The offense contributed to the poor game of the defense. And the fact that, they're at Jim Sports, one of my favorites, Jim would always say there's a personality to every game. As a coach, there hasn't been much to complain about with Nick Sirianni and Shane Steichen. But I thought they didn't pick up quickly enough that game had a personality. And they're running tempo in the second quarter when that defense is on the field. They're not getting off the field. Now, you can blame the defense. That's fair. You got to get off the field on third downs. They couldn't get off the field. But as an offensive coach, how much responsibility do you have to say, all right, we got to give these guys a breather? Even if we're going 3 and out, let's huddle. Let's run some plays. Let's run the football. Let's give them a little bit of a breather. And they're running tempo, and they're right off the field again. I don't think they've gotten enough criticism, and my dog thinks so too.
Your dog agrees. I'm surprised my dogs haven't made any noise yet. No, I agree with you there. I mean, I think that the offense was just in general a little bit you're saying, styles make fights is the expression that I know from boxing. And it's the Eagles offense, I remember there was I tweeted it out. I was like, this is a big drive. They got to just give the Eagles defense a break. And I do think that that's a big part of this run defense that we haven't really talked about, is that those guys were gassed, by the second half. I mean, they had just been on the field for so long, and that is exhausting trying to stop the run constantly like that. So I do think that the tempo, I see why they do it, because it's that's kind of their pacifier when things aren't necessarily going great for the offense. It's let's go tempo, get everybody into a rhythm, kind of keep the defense on the field. But you're right. I mean, the Washington defense wasn't going to be tired, and the Eagles defense was sitting on the sideline just begging for a break. And there were a lot of times even some of those the punt, the block punt, obviously they only had to go out for another play, but even that type of stuff I imagine is exhausting. It's you jog off the field, you're all excited, and then all of a sudden one play later it's you got to go back out and play. Now, again, I know it was just one play, but that kind of stuff does add up.
All right, EJ, last one from me. Take this to either the players or the coaching staff, whichever you think is more important. The Eagles haven't been in this week's situation in a year. And when I say this week's situation, I mean after a loss that really meant something. Yeah, they were against Tampa, but guess what? Everybody packed up and went home. So I'm talking about going back into the locker room, getting ready for the next game after a big loss. The last one like this was Jalen Hurts' worst game against the Giants when he threw the 3 picks last year. They finished out with the wins. The JV playing against Dallas doesn't really count for me. And they won 8 straight games to one. So this is the first time in a year they've had to go through what they have to go through to get ready for a game after a loss. Who's that on this week more so? The coaching staff or the players themselves to be in the right mindset, to do the right preparation, to be ready for the Colts on Sunday?
I think it's players. Obviously the coach sets the message for the week and, is the one that talks the most to the group. But I really think it's up to the players to make that decision on how they're going to respond. And I don't know about you, John, but my impression was that these guys are kind of listen, we didn't play our best game. We have a lot to clean up. We're not going to dwell on this. We're just going to move on to the next one. And I think that's the best way to look at it, honestly. And I think that, another reason why it's on the players is because the Eagles have really strong leadership. They've got a lot of guys who have been in the building for a long time, and then Jalen Hurts is kind of ingratiated into that leadership group just because, he's wired the right way. So I'm not, whenever it's like a question of like, personality of the team and how they might respond to whether it's adversity or success. One of the reasons I think the Eagles started the season 8-0 is because Jalen Hurts wasn't going to let anybody, take an opponent lightly. He wasn't going to let them, read their own press clippings or, get too big for their bridges. He was going to say, you guys got to, take it week by week, day by day, as he's always saying, daily deposits, all that stuff. So, yeah, I'm not concerned about the Eagles, handling adversity at this point. I mean, I think we've seen, enough of the guys in the locker room do it to know what they're about. So yeah, no, I think that it's mostly on the players. And I do think based off of how they were talking after the game that they're in the right mindset. I don't think they're dwelling on the loss.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, Jalen sets the tone there. At EJ Smith 94, follow EJ on Twitter. Read him at the Build Up Inquirer. Does a tremendous job covering this team. And I'm with you. I mean, this team, Darius Slay took accountability. Right off the bat, he probably had his worst game of the year. I think Fletcher probably had his worst game of the year. Those guys tend to respond. And the offense, EJ, this coaching staff, all they talk about, 2 stats. That's it. 2 stats besides the scoreboard. Win the turnovers, win the explosive play battle. You're going to win the game. They didn't win it for the first time. They lost the game. It was the turnovers, but they lost the game. That's what it comes down to for this coaching staff, and they're not changing.
Did they win the play battle? And again, how do we mark the explosive plays?
The Eagles do
20
16 plus on pass plays, 10 plus on run plays. I thought it was 12. It's 10, but
a lot of other places do 20 plus on pass.
Yeah.
Okay. So did they win that this week? I think they did.
I think they won explosive, didn't they?
They won explosive. They lost turnovers. You got to win them both.
EJ, great stuff. Appreciate you coming on board with us. Thank you much. We will get you back on again down the road and let you don that Inquirer hat.
Appreciate you guys having me. Thanks again.
Our pleasure. EJ Smith from the Inquirer.